Greetings and welcome to today's SPH Alumni webinar, The Art of Negotiation, Achieving Your Worth and More. I'm Sarah Pennebecker, Assistant Director of Alumni Relations. Thank you to all alumni, students, and friends of the School of Public Health who have made time to join us live today. Today's webinar is co-hosted by the SPH Office of Alumni Relations and the Career and Professional Development Center. We are excited to offer this webinar to encourage and provide lifelong learning to both long and distance alumni, and we plan to offer more webinars in the future as part of an ongoing series. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. If you join the presentation listening using your computer speaker system and you would prefer to listen over the telephone, just select the unmute button with the little caret at the bottom left of your screen and select switch to phone audio. If you experience audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, this can be caused by having multiple software applications open, which can use up your computer's bandwidth and affect network performance. Listening in on a wireless signal may affect performance as well. Feel free to close any unnecessary applications on your computer. Questions are welcome and you may submit them at any time. Please type in your questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You should see a pop-up screen where you can type your question. We'll be monitoring questions along the way, so please submit your questions or comments at any time. And now for our webinar on the art of negotiation. I'd like to introduce the presenter of this webinar, Darren Kaltved. Darren currently serves as the Associate Director of the Career and Professional Development Center for the School of Public Health. He brings over 18 years of quality practitioner experience in career and professional development, was a nominee for the National Career Counselor of the Year, and has held numerous local and national professional leadership roles. Darren is known for being a maximizer and loves playing a vital role in assisting students in making their dreams become a reality. He recently co-authored a book titled Love at First Interview, 8 Steps to Land a Job. Welcome, Darren. I'll turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you everyone for joining us today. A good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. I want to give a special shout out to Sarah for being our host today, and excited to bring you a topic that for a lot of people can be a little intimidating. So hopefully after you leave today, you have some ideas and confidence and interest in developing your worth. What I'm going to try to do is tailor this conversation about negotiation to not just those that are negotiating job offers, which is kind of what most people will think of when it comes to negotiation, but also those currently in a position looking to advance. So again, feel free, as Sarah mentioned, to throw in some questions that you have, and I want to leave some time at the end to address those. So here we go. All right, as I mentioned, the art of negotiation is one of those things, or just the word negotiation can be scary. For a lot of people, there's a lot of apprehension in they want to negotiate, but they're afraid of what the reaction would be. They don't want to lose an offer. They don't want to make people upset. And so they're initially starting off looking at it as a no-no. Like, I don't want to impact my opportunity here, and so they don't negotiate at all. The other aspect is that negotiation can be intimidating, and here you have an employer that you're excited by the position, and you kind of view them as in a hierarchical way, and so they're high up and you're down below, and you don't want to do anything that's gonna start that off on the wrong foot, if you will. And so it's for a lot of people, they view this as intimidating. However, what is the reality? The reality is that it's similar to if for those of you joining us, if you've ever bought a car or even buying a house or any major purchase where there's a possibility of coming to an agreement on a price. And I like to use the car dealership as a good example. And I'm going to share a little story about an experience I had where I was going to purchase a car. And so I went to the dealership. I had done my research. I had, kind of knew what I was kind of looking for and, kind of what they were going for in other dealerships. And so I walked to the dealership and walked in and started talking to, a very polite salesman. And he, kind of showed me around some of the vehicles that I was interested in and the colors and all this kind of stuff. Well, then it came time to have the air quotes conversation. And what happened was that he came in with a price in terms of a payment price per month that was well beyond the research I had done. And so I kindly shared with him, I actually passed a Post-it note and said, this is the price that I'm looking to pay per month. And his reaction to that was, it wasn't negative, but it was more like, I really don't see us being able to do that. And the key here is I didn't budge. I said, look, I get where you're coming from. You want, to try to get the best deal possible from your perspective, but so am I. And I've done the research and I know kind of what the going rates are out there. And I feel confident that this is something that we can make happen. And so he said, well, I'm going to have to run this by the manager, of course. So he took it to the manager and came back and said, here's kind of the best we can do. It was still well above the number I'd written on the Post-it note. And so what I ended up doing was I thanked him for his time and effort, and I got up and left. And what was interesting is as I walked out the door, it wasn't no more than, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And here he comes running out after me and saying, wait. We can, let's come back in. I'm confident we can make a deal. And sure enough, I did end up leaving with the car at the price that I wanted. And so if you've ever been in a situation like that, it's understanding, and we're going to get into this, understanding the values of different things, understanding that there's some research that has to be done, there's confidence, and it's not overconfidence, but it's being confident enough to say, look, this is kind of where I'm at, this is where I'm coming from. I'm not just throwing a random number out there. I do have some proof. So negotiation, believe it or not, again, a lot of people think it's scary. A lot of people think it's intimidating. What do the employers think of negotiation? And for most people, this is a huge surprise. They actually see it as a positive. If you think about it, negotiation is basically advocating for yourself. This is something that employers themselves have done. This is something that they may or may not do as an organization in terms of negotiating contracts. But what they're going to typically do is they're going to provide you an offer that is on the lower end of the range. It's not something that's drastically low. It's lower, but still, it's in consideration of the range. And so they're trying to get you as cheap as possible. And so when they look at someone who is there advocating for themselves and really is confident that their value and their worth is much greater than what the offer was, they see that as a positive. They see that as, a future employee that really has the confidence and belief for advocating for what is right. And so lot of folks out there think this is that employers are going to get angry, or they're going to kind of respond negatively, like, I can't believe you're asking me, right? It's the complete opposite. And so just know going into any negotiation that it's a positive experience. When should you negotiate? Okay. And this is something that is probably one of the most common questions that I get, and that is, when should I? Are there ever offers where you just don't negotiate? Or maybe I'm in a current role, and when's the appropriate time to do this? Well, it's an easy answer, always. Every single time, no matter how good the offer may be, always negotiate it. I'll give you an example. So 2 years ago, I was working with a student, happened to be a public health administration and policy student, and she ended up getting 2 offers from pretty well-known national, international organizations. And the offer that came in was more than double what she expected to graduate with or come out of school with, and to the point where she had no idea what to do with this amount of money. It was 6 figures, and so she was a little intimidated by that amount, but she got another offer that was kind of similar from another organization. So she came to me and said, so I'm assuming we don't negotiate this, right? Because it's awesome. And I paused and I said, I completely understand, but we're going to negotiate. And so what ended up happening was, because the offers were very similar, we actually used each of them as leverage. And one organization ended up offering slightly higher salary, a very significant amount of relocation assistance, and a signing bonus that a lot of people would take as a full-time salary. And so you never know when there's opportunities to walk away with a great deal. And so you always want to negotiate. And there's a lot of research out there by gender, and that they're tying negotiation a little bit to inequities in pay and so on. But I really, really, really recommend that everyone, that negotiation is something you always want to do. The same thing applies to if you're currently in your role, and there's always opportunities to negotiate. Let's say that they end up adding half a person's job, maybe they're out on leave or they're consolidating roles, and they add extra responsibilities to your plate. This is prime time to do that. Performance evaluations is another good example. Anytime where you're doing more than what you were hired for, or if there's a position title change, everything is negotiable, and any time is the right time to negotiate. All right, what is negotiation? Well, basically, it's the art and science of securing agreements between 2 or more parties who are interdependent, but are seeking to maximize their own outcomes. So if you think about it, it's like we have this mountain, and at the peak of the mountain is where you want to meet, okay? When an offer comes forth, what they have determined is that they value you, they value your product, and here is the amount that they feel is the value of that product. And ultimately what they want to do is get a satisfied, happy, excited employee, and to come to a mutual agreement. There's a lot of people that will leave money on the table, and it's not just I'm trying to drain them as much as possible of their revenue and money. It's coming to an agreement that, look, here are the things I'm going to bring to this organization. Here are the experience and skills I'm going to bring, and I want to get at least paid for what I'm worth. And we're going to dive into this in a little bit more detail, but negotiation, both parties are involved. It's a two-way street, but they are interdependent. So for those of you that have worked with me or know me, I like to take the simple approach. And one of the things that when it comes to negotiation, I like to split it into these 3 Ps: preparation, poise, and professionalism. And we're going to dive into each of these in a little bit more detail. So let me start with preparation, okay? If I had to pick one of the 3 Ps that are probably the most important, this would be it. And so I'm going to start by talking about these 2 types of values. And this is kind of the crux of negotiation, no matter, again, if you've got a job offer or you're at your current employer and you're looking to grow within that and be compensated. The first one is the market value for the position you're being offered or the position that you're in or getting promoted to or have the opportunity to get promoted to. And another way to look at it is what's the competitive or going rate out there. There's a lot of great resources in terms of, you can see them there on the screen, Glassdoor, salary. I like Glassdoor, I use that quite a bit. Any public entity like government, their salary is public, just like here at the University of Minnesota. So you can kind of get a good grasp of what the going rate is out there. And yes, sometimes position titles can kind of skew that a little bit. But look at kind of the gist of what you're doing and what would be a comparable rate. The other thing that factors in here, which we'll talk about a little later, is geographical location, okay? So what's the market value for a position here versus, say, California, where the cost of living is much greater? And so you want to kind of know, all right, what's the going rate, and am I getting that? Am I even close to that? The second, and you could argue the most important, is your value. What are you worth, okay? The easiest way to determine this would be, how do you compare to the minimum and most importantly, preferred qualifications? What do you bring that's beyond what they're asking for? Let's say it's a bachelor's degree required and you have a master's or PhD degree. That's an example. Let's say they're looking for 3+ years of experience and you have 5+ years of experience. Let's say they're looking for, they preferred a language skill and you have that. Any little thing that you bring is ammunition for you to move up on the salary range, okay? And so if you have a position that you're being offered, look at the position description and kind of determine, are there things that you bring that are above average? A very common one that a lot of people overlook is previous experience with that organization. And so just keep that in mind. For those in a current role looking to move up or be compensated for additional responsibilities, I always recommend when you're in a position, and I still have a folder for this, would be kind of my good job folder, like things that I've done that I've exceeded expectations, or I've done, I've accomplished things, I've delivered quality outcomes, anything like that. Have a folder, have a place where you have those. That can come into play when it comes time to negotiating a bump in pay, a title change, whatever it may be, is evidence. Having evidence of that, hey, I was, prior to taking on this new responsibility, I was devoting 50% of my time to this priority or part of the role. Now with these new responsibilities, that has to be cut in half. And I'm assuming that that's something you don't want. That's as an organization. And so that's where you have leverage, where you can say, look, I have a proven record where I've been able to deliver and deliver well. And all my performance evals have been very positive. And so with this extra responsibility, I feel like, you know what, I think it's ready to sit down and to have an open conversation about about a pay bump. So what is the value of the position and what is your value? Other things to keep in mind, you know, the company, the size of the company, the industry. Are they nonprofit? Are they private? Are they public sector? Are they academia? There's a lot of info out there in terms of, you know, you can find out how much money do they actually have. And, you know, I've heard it all, people. I've heard organizations that are rolling in the dough and someone goes to negotiate and they're like, you know, our budgets are slim and, you know, unfortunately we can't budge that much. But if in the back of your mind, or you've done your research and they're basically not telling the full truth, that can be very telling. And so understand their culture, understand their industry. I talked earlier about geographical location. This is a big one. If, you know, you're looking to go out to a place where the cost of living is greater, that absolutely factors in. And there's some really good resources out there, cost of living indexes, that you can just throw in some numbers and it'll tell you kind of what you need to be paid in terms of that location. I will say this, that based off of evidence and data, there are places that are good and there are places that are bad. The two worst in terms of paying to cost of living are Washington, D.C. and New York. And the best would be California, believe it or not. Midwest is actually pretty strong as well. South is hit or miss. You're better off hitting larger cities like Austin, Houston, Texas, Dallas, Phoenix, Arizona, you know, Atlanta, Georgia, places like that. But East Coast, that's tough. That's, you know, just going into it, that know that they may not come close to what you've determined is the appropriate cost of living. Also, as part of the negotiation, I know we tend to talk a lot about salary, but with salary and benefits, what is considered the total compensation package, you want to look at, when you look at the offer, what are my must-haves? What are things that I need to have in this offer that I'm not willing to live without? For instance, a lot of times those can be paid holidays or sick leave, medical insurance, 401k. It varies for each individual, but there are some things that, you know, you're going to want to think about of, you know, for me to consider this opportunity, here are some of the things I must have. Second, what are things that you would like to have, like profit sharing benefits, or tuition assistance, or pet insurance? I mean, there's a lot of different things out there. And then what are the things you could live without? Let's say that part of this role, there, you know, maybe once, maybe twice a month, you're going to have to work weekends. And while that may not be ideal, you know, that's something that you're like, okay, I get it. This position's really cool. I'm willing to kind of put that aside. And so it's important for you to think about this as you look over offers. Again, most of this must-haves, would-haves, could-haves comes in regards to the benefits. All right. Sarah just notified me of a question, so I'm going to kind of divert here. When you apply for jobs, you are told to apply to jobs you want and not necessarily the jobs you are qualified for, since they usually post qualifications for their ideal candidate. How to take into account if you don't meet the minimum qualifications? Good one. All right. So this is a really, really good question. One of the things that I'm going to share with this, and may surprise you, is that a job posting or a position description is their wish list. And if you think about it, they actually don't want it all. All they're saying to you is, here's everything that we would need in this position. It's kind of like a Christmas list. Are you going to get everything on your Christmas list? No, right? And if you do, then you got the right parents, I guess. But more than likely, it's their wish list. if I brought everything on that list, the room for growth for me would be so small, I may last a month, maybe 6 at most. They're looking to invest in you. They're looking for a long-term investment. And so you really want to think about that the actual number or the percentage that you need to have in order to apply is 60%. If you meet at least 60% of what they're looking for, you apply. Again, assuming there's interest there. I want to mention, so that's number one. Number two, you're going to see a lot of job postings that are very old school. These are job postings that, haven't changed in 20 years. These are ones that'll say 3 to 5 years experience in blank. Here's the reality. The reality is they're guessing, okay? There's no metrics out there that says for this type of position, you need to ask for X number of years of experience. What it is you have baby boomers who are writing job postings and writing it from their perspective. And it's nothing against them. That's just what they know. They came right through, whether it's the GI Bill, they came from high school and worked their way up. Experience, experience, experience. And so, they haven't adapted to the reality that now it's more about skills, and that students are coming out of degree programs way more prepared and way more ready to hit the ground running. And so that 3 to 5 years experience, for instance, don't sweat it, okay? Now, is there a number of years of experience where it can be kind of obvious that it may not quite be ready for you, like 10 to 15 years experience? Sure, absolutely. But if you look at it and you feel you can do at least or bring at least 60% of what they're doing, go after it. All right, next we're going to talk about poise. And this is basically your ability to remain calm and confident in uncomfortable or frustrating situations, okay? Here's how, okay? It's easier said than done, but it's so important that they have provided this offer based off of your behavior up until this point, okay? I get asked all the time, will the employer pull the offer, okay? And in the 18 plus years of experience that I've had doing this, I've had 2 situations, only 2, where offers were pulled, and it was for the exact same reason. And that was the individual, the applicant, who was negotiating had poor poise and then had poor professionalism, which is the third P. I'll get to that shortly. They were way too aggressive, way too demanding. And to be honest, the employer started looking at this individual from the perspective of, is this really someone that we want working here to join our team? And so they ended up retracting their offer. Again, 2 times in 18 years. But if you go in and you're calm and confident and respectful and professional, you're good. You always want to convey your confidence throughout the process, okay? Anytime you get to an interview, anytime you get an offer, you have done your job. You have convinced them that you have the skills and experience and behaviors and personality to do this job and do it well. You fit their team. They're not going to have you go through a process if they don't believe that. Showing continuous enthusiasm and appreciation for the offer is always a plus. Even if they're 20,000 below the going rate, you still want to be appreciative. This actually happened recently with a local county public health department here in Minnesota, where this particular county had a kind of a unique approach to determine how much they're going to pay a new employee. They had this formula, and what the formula was they would pay that individual 4% more than what they were previously making. Well, here's the thing: they were hiring students right out of grad school, and that student had a GA position, and so when they got 4% of what that GA was, it was a pretty low salary, okay? Now, the good news is we were actually able to negotiate that and that individual ended up getting $17,000 more, and well more into the middle of the going rate. And it actually turned into me having a conversation with that county, and they're actually looking to change that formula. So positive things can come from this, but you always want to be appreciative, stay positive. Okay, you've heard this, you've seen it. I'm here to tell you again, when an offer is made, never, 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 never accept it on the spot. I know we get excited, and it's so difficult to, especially I gave you that example of the student with the six-figure offer. It's so difficult to want to accept it right there, especially if you've been job searching for a while. You're just happy to get an offer. All I can say is you at least need a day or two, 24 hours, whatever it can be, minimum, if not longer, to just kind of let things settle down a little bit. Come down from cloud nine and just, what is the reality of the offer, okay? And have time to process it. Because what it's going to allow you to do is really look at it in more detail. And you can look at it in a way of, does this actually make sense for me and where I'm at? A lot of students will work out a budget just to see if, does this make sense for my lifestyle, where I'm living or where I want to live. Maybe I want to continue renting, or I want to buy a house, or my car's about to fall apart and I need a new vehicle. All these different things, okay? It also gives you opportunity to talk to myself or my colleague Vic, so that we can go through it and kind of help explain, is this a good total compensation package? Or because we're always going to negotiate, what do we need to ask? What would be recommended to ask for? So you never, 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 never want to accept on the spot.
So Darren, we have another question coming in that I think will relate to this slide as well. What are some strategies for negotiating at bigger companies that maybe hire many people for the same position each year and claim that they have a standard compensation package for that position?
Yeah, what a great question, actually. This is something we're seeing a lot more of when it comes to equity of pay. We're seeing that here at the University of Minnesota, for instance, as well. And some people call it a flat structure. But here's the thing, and I'm going to get into the depths or the weeds of negotiation, where they may hire, let's say their financial advisors, and they may hire 20 to 30 of them. But are all 20 and 30 of them advocating on their behalf? No. And so what you're doing is you're advocating for either compensation, it could be for advancement, it could be for continued growth and development. It could be where maybe you need to work remotely one day of the week. Maybe it's that you see an opportunity, a new position open up, and you want to have a conversation about their support of you going after a position. There's so many different things, but I would say this, as long as you approach this with professionalism and poise, the worst thing that can happen is they don't budge. And so it's always worth asking that and coming in with evidence to indicate that, look, I've been here for a while. I know that a lot of my peers have as well. Here's some of the evidence why I feel I'm ready for a bump. And, nothing's going to change if you don't ask. And so I'm always a fan of that. Now, a lot of that does come into making sure you've developed a strong rapport and relationship with your supervisor. And if that relationship is a little rocky, then that brings up a whole lot of other conversations that you and I should probably have. But that's, build a rapport, build a relationship, come in with evidence or data, if you will, and And again, the worst that can happen is they don't budge. More than likely, they're going to meet you where you're at. So I definitely feel that that's, no matter the size of the company, no matter how many people they bring in, you are you, and you get the luxury to determine what your worth is. All right. And lastly, I'm going to say this, that how much do they value your product? Not everyone else as a collective, your product. We see this a lot with larger companies who, you know, the students will negotiate, they just don't budge. And, you know, the student is him and hawing, and they go to have the conversation again with the employer, and the employer is like, well, you know, just so you know, if you don't take this, I'll just move on to the next one. Well, what does that tell you? That tells me that you're just a number, that they don't have a lot of value in your product. They don't feel that you are the right fit for that position. They kind of just group you in a generic grouping of candidates, and they feel, oh, I can get someone just as good, right? Is that the type of place you want to work for? More than likely not. So all this can be very positive. But again, if there are specific organizations, reach out to us. You know, we've worked with all of them, and you know, it's always fun to negotiate. I always say, once you negotiate, it's an addiction. And so many times throughout the year, I'm going with people to buy cars. All right, professionalism. This is the way. So you'll hear a lot about in interviews that you're going to be asked, the most commonly asked interview question are behavioral questions. Now, the reason for that is past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Well, this kind of relates to this, where approaching this conversation professionally is an example of the behavior that the employer can expect to see on the job. This is why those two situations where offers were pulled were, their behavior was not good, okay? And so it's one of those things where, you know, it's being professional, but being confident and not being over aggressive, okay? Again, you and the employer are sharing a common goal. They want you to come in excited and not disappointed, not angry, not upset that you didn't get what you're worth. And one of the things that I always suggest is that when you go into this conversation, it's going to be coupled with questions you have either about the position and or about the offer in general. It could be questions about benefits and getting clarity. It could be questions that you want to negotiate some benefits. And obviously, you're going to pair that with salary conversations. One of the good questions that I like when people ask is, you have every right to ask how they came to that number. How did they arrive to that salary amount? And that can be pretty telling, okay? But it's, you know, that can kind of give you an idea of, all right, is this, you know, they just throw a number out there? Are they trying to, you know, shoot low? This is how that county public health, a student asked this, and they said, well, we have this formula, right? Well, if the student didn't ask that, then, you know, would we have gotten 17,000 more? Probably not, okay? Most importantly, is one of the things I say to anyone I work with on negotiation, whatever you do, and again, this is more difficult, it's easier said than done, but detach yourself from the outcome. This is not about you. If they don't budge, it is not your fault. This is not you did something wrong, okay? They're just not willing to pay the price for the value of your product. That is what it's saying, okay? You can walk away at any point. So if you advocate for yourself, you negotiate anything, let alone salary, don't attach yourself personally to that, okay? Focus on the value of the total package. I talked about that earlier. Again, these are things like start date, salary, benefits, signing bonuses, relocation assistance, which, by the way, let me talk a little bit about signing bonuses and relocation assistance. Anytime you take a position in another geographical location, or your company that you're currently at is relocating and they want you to go to another state or another city, always, remember that word always, ask for this. It's big, 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 big. Let's say they're not budging much with salary. Signing bonuses can be big, okay? And so this is something that I had another student recently where they increased the salary a little bit. And so I actually had her ask for a signing bonus, and they gave her a pretty substantial signing bonus. And what that did was it allowed her and her partner to, travel, look for housing, even have a down payment for rent or for a new house purchase. So you never know, but that's the total compensation package. I want to mention that most compensation packages, when you look at like benefits, basically cover about 30 to 40% in addition to the salary. So they add about 30 to 40% of value to your package. Just think about that, okay? Why does no one leave the University of Minnesota? Well, we have the second best benefits in the state other than the state of Minnesota. And one of those is the 401k, where they will contribute a certain percentage into your retirement plan, no matter how much I put in. And so I'll throw out a crazy number. When I started here, they were going to put in 13%, and I put in 2%. In that, you don't see that, right? And so taking into account this kind of aspect kind of was, okay, maybe I'm willing to take a slightly lower pay. If that's long-term wise, I'm going to be sitting pretty well and be able to retire and get to the beach sooner than I thought. All right. Also, again, know where you're willing to compromise, know where you're not. One of the earlier slides, what are your must-haves, what are your coulda-has, and what are your things that you could live without, right? And just what do you need at that point? One of the popular things right now that people are negotiating is telecommuting. And surprisingly, it's actually very positive. A lot of organizations understand the difficulties and the dynamics with the cost of daycare, the lack of transportation assistance out there, the people coming from rural areas, and just the cost. I mean, here I talk about at the university, we have great benefits, but where can you think of where you have to go and park and pay to work, right? I mean, think about it. And so there are things that you always want to take into account. And yes, you can negotiate in a parking pass or a transit pass into your offer. Literally, you can negotiate everything. All right, finally, know when to quit, know when to stop. That's kind of what, what's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different outcomes. If they're not budging, don't push it. Again, you can walk away at any point, just like I walked away at the car dealership, okay? And if they're not willing to at least compromise and give you close, if not at, or more importantly, above your worth, you need to ask yourself that question: is this a place I want to be? Okay, and what am I willing to compromise and what am I not? So, just read the situation. If you're ever in a pickle or a dilemma, let us know.
So Darren, we had 2 more questions come in that are very similar. So the first one is, I've had recruiters at companies say, this is our range and this is what we can offer you. on the first phone call before the real interviews have even started or formal offer has been made? What is the best way to respond to this? And similarly, I've been asked during a phone screening what my salary requirements are, and they didn't post the salary range. How would you handle this?
Awesome. Yes, so these kind of go hand in hand. And one of the trends that we're seeing are employers are asking this salary expectation question a lot sooner in the process. To be honest, it's a way for them to filter are individuals pricing themselves out of the position. There are some good strategies that I'm going to offer you today that is going to allow you to play it safe and leave room for negotiation. The first thing is never, never, never give them a number, ever. Okay? If at minimum, I mean, you can give a range, but here's the thing: if they ask you salary expectations, and they haven't shared the range yet, or they don't, you don't know the range yet, ask. So let's say they ask me, Sarah asked me, what are your salary expectations? My first response back was, can you tell me the range for this position? That kind of forces their hand to provide the range. And when they provide the range, you can say, well, based off of my research, my market research, that seems negotiable. Okay, that's one response. The second response would be, again, the range. And this is where if they're providing the range for you and they ask you what your salary expectations are, you're going to respond very similar and say, I notice the range you provided based off of the research that I've done and looking at the going rate and where I feel I fall in that, I feel this range is negotiable. Okay. The last approach would simply be, when they ask the salary expectation question, would simply be to say, as for me, I'm looking at a salary that would be comparable to my experience and the going rate in this market. Now, what have I done there? And any of those, right? I'm not backing myself into a corner, okay? And so I always say, when you go into an interview or you're applying for a position, before you even apply, look at what that salary range or that market value would be, just so you have an idea going in. So when they ask, you're kind of like, okay, is this range comparable, or is it well below what they should be offering? Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. Questions. If not, let me know and I can keep going. All right, here's a few additional tips, okay? During the interview, don't be the first one to approach the salary issue. Always, 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 always wait for them to bring it up, okay? You should never be the first one to bring it up. Do not negotiate salaries until a job offer has been made, okay? You don't want to get yourself into that pickle, because that can be a mess. We just talked about be ready for the salary expectation question. One of the things that can come up, and it doesn't come up that often, this bullet point kind of reminds me of the local county public health department, where avoid mentioning past salary or hourly wage history unless they ask for it. A lot of times they'll ask for it on when you apply, if they have an online application form. What that tells me is there's a chance that they may have a, air quotes, formula that they may use, and that could be a red flag. But do whatever you can to kind of avoid that. Never stop selling yourself. Even in the negotiation process, remember, you're coming in with evidence, and really you're continuing to tell the company how you and your product are going to bring value to them. And you're going to do that throughout the negotiation process. Once the offer has been made, okay, I'm all about fancy tricks. right? I think this is an even playing field. If they're going to play hardball, I'm going to play hardball, and so on and so forth. And one of the tricks is when, let's say they provide you an offer right there at the end of the interview, or they provide you an offer over the phone. I actually did this with buying that car. So I repeated the figure, and then I stayed silent 15, 30 seconds. I wasn't, I wasn't looking at the salesman. I was just contemplating and thinking it over. And then I responded, okay? This is a great time to ask how they came to this number, even if it's a big number and it's impressive to you, to kind of get an idea. Sometimes you're going to be surprised where employers will actually recognize and afford well above your value. They will say, you bring awesome experience, you have an advanced degree, and we, really value that. And so here's what we're willing to offer. Remember that benefits can be negotiable. I like to use the example that, let's say you get a part of your compensation package is a benefit that you get for pet insurance. What if I don't have a pet? Okay. This is an opportunity where you can actually ask if there's a way that you can swap out benefits, ones that you don't use with another, or if you're not using that, could they add that to your compensation? Okay. And so anything can be negotiable. I mentioned parking, I mentioned travel, I mentioned, you can even negotiate a laptop, okay? You can negotiate mileage reimbursement. I mean, anything, okay? I'd be careful on getting the corner office, that one, or an office with a window. You may want to hold back on that one, at least, get in there, work for a while, then maybe they'll offer you that. So, those are, just keep in mind, there are things that when you look at the entire package, you want to consider everything, okay? All right. After the negotiation, so when you think you've reached a satisfactory agreement, here's the thing, always, always, always get the offer in writing. If you were provided the initial offer in writing, make sure that anything you negotiate after that is updated and you are sent a new letter. Do not agree to any offer without an official letter. That could come in email, but it's before you sign on the dotted line, do not accept, okay? If this third bullet, if the employer doesn't offer a formal letter, you can write your own. I've never had to do this in 18 years, but if this does happen, definitely let us know. We can walk you through how to write this up. You're basically writing your own offer letter, and then they sign off on it to make it legal. So, all right, and of course, not all negotiations go as well as you would hope, okay? They just don't. And so don't be afraid to walk away like I did with the car dealership, okay? And I get it. It's, I see this a lot with students graduating, for them to walk away from an offer knowing the importance and how much they want to have a job when they graduate. It's a tough decision, but I keep stressing, you have your worth. You have a certain value, and don't accept anything less than that. It's really important that you remember that. So be confident, and like I tell everyone, look, we're going to get you as much as we can, okay? And we're going to do everything possible to make that happen. I've included here a bunch of resources for you that if you're interested in exploring this even further, There's, and you're going to have access to this. So I want to turn it over to questions and comments at this point.
So I think we have time for just one final question. We've had so many great questions come in. So our final question is it helpful to disclose your financial burdens like transportation or daycare as you're negotiating? Or is it better to say generally that my cost for taking this job is this much? Can you meet that? What suggestions do you have around framing?
What a great question. I would say this. I would say only share what you're comfortable sharing. Another way to look at this would be what's in your control and not in your control. So if you chose to apply for a position and go through the process and you get an offer and you're excited by it, but that you knew going into this that you would have to commute 45 minutes each way, that's on you, okay? And so mentioning that to your employer is not going to be much helpful. However, if let's say, and this happens a lot with like in New York City or Washington, D.C. or Chicago, I'll have a lot of people actually negotiate if they don't see anything or hear anything about this in the offer, a transit pass or parking, a subway pass. And you know, it's one of those where I've had some employers say, oh, yeah, of course, that's absolutely included. And others say, you know, that's a really good question. Let me see what we can do, okay? But just know that if you're comfortable, feel free to share the burdens. In most cases, I would withhold them just because it's not what it's about in terms of why you're negotiating. You're advocating for yourself. The entire total compensation package for you taking into account those financial burdens, right? Taking into account, what if they have on-site daycare? Or, uh-oh, they don't. Okay, well, I better work out a budget. I don't need to share that with the employer, but I may have to push a little bit more just so I can, you know, come away with a positive outcome here. I feel financially stable. So, you know, do values and do priorities of where you're at in your life come into play? 100%. Absolutely. An interesting story. So I had a student who was applying for an internship out of Washington, D.C. And again, they're one of the worst paying areas in the country. And so they offered the student $14 an hour. Yeah, Washington, D.C. And so the student did a budget and determined that we actually found a place for him with an alum that he could stay for very, 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 very cheap. And he did a budget and he said, you know, if they would just increase it by $1, I would come ahead 42 cents. And so he negotiated, they did not budge. I know, like I said, sometimes it does not go your way and you can walk away at any point. And he actually did and actually found a better opportunity. So it's funny how things work out. But I would say in terms of financial burdens, keep them to yourself more than likely, unless you're comfortable sharing it. But yeah, they're going to be a huge factor in how you negotiate.
Well, thank you, Darren. So just in the last minute we have remaining, just want to bring your attention to some upcoming webinars and other opportunities that we have going on. And so we have 2 more webinars coming up here in March and April. The one in March is also facilitated by our very wonderful Darren here. So the Bamboo Style of Networking. I'm really excited for that webinar as well. And then we have another webinar in April, or with the giant hairball. You gotta love these creative and funky titles. And then those are open to anyone. And then if you are an alum of the school here, we are offering our Career Transitions Network that meets the second Wednesday of the month from 8 to 9 a.m. And there's information on your screen about how you register. And just want to say thank you to everyone for participating, and we hope you have a great day. You'll receive a follow-up email within the next couple of days with a link to this recording, as well as some other resources that were mentioned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.